So my journey with a child having mental health issues is hard to put into words. It's like nothing else I've had to deal with. This was so out of my control. I found that it's been a roller coaster ride from the very beginning. And the difficulty is nobody really understood what I was going through. Professionals were sympathetic, but I could see their frustration when they were dealing with my daughter. And none of my friends or family were in the same situation. They didn't have a child with severe mental health issues that was self-harming. So they didn't understand. Although they're trying to be supportive, I felt very much alone. And dealing with the system in Canada was such a roller coaster ride of frustration and anger and upset and glimpse of hope. But then they would just stop and they didn't work for her. And I had to look elsewhere. I was so desperate that I needed to go somewhere else. I wasn't sure if she was playing with the idea of maybe I don't want to be here. I don't have any other choice, but do I really want it to happen? Do I really want to die? When they attempt suicide, they don't usually want to die in the end. It was definitely a cry for help. They just want someone to notice them, hear their cries. But the problem is, sometimes they cut too deep or they jump from a height too high. And even though their intention is just to say, hey, I'm here, please see me, they end up dying without getting the help they needed. And I believe that each time that my child attempted suicide, and there were many, I really believed it was a cry for help. She sometimes would cut herself and then call the ambulance herself. I had no idea that my child was suffering that much. And that in itself is beyond a trauma that I was capable of dealing with. And nothing in the world, no life experience prepared me for that moment. So each time that she attempted suicide, it brought me to my knees. It opened my eyes. It got me to hold her and be there for her in a way that I obviously wasn't. I felt like, okay, this time now she really wants to get help. Now she's saying, help me, see me, mommy. See me for all the struggles and all the pain that I'm going through. And I thought, okay, I'm here, baby. I'll do anything for you. But it was only like a Band-Aid. Every time that she went to the hospital, it was a Band-Aid approach. It only helped her for a few days. And eventually I saw the frustration that she kept saying, hey, I'm here, I need help. But I didn't have the ability to help her to the extent that she needed. It brought me to my knees like I have never been brought to my knees. Like literally on the floor in the hospital crying. It wasn't until Erin's last attempts and many, many hospital stays later. She called me, I think it was 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and she was standing on the highest bridge in Toronto that she could find. I don't even know how I found her because she didn't really know where she was. But luckily there was someone that saw her standing there and stayed with her. And I pleaded with them, don't leave her until I get there. I ran in my nightgown and that was it. I knew that I couldn't wait anymore. It was that moment that I knew my window to help her was closing and closing fast. I really thought I could have lost her. And that was when she surrendered. And that's when she said, Mommy, I don't want to hurt like this anymore. The pain is too hard. Please help me. I just can't do this anymore. And I just said to her, hang on. I love you. I'm coming. I will find you. Oh, my anger ran deep. What I realized as a therapist, and I talk to myself often and say, okay, if I was my own client, what would I say? And when I got angry, because I was so frustrated with my child, I couldn't help her the way that I needed to, and she wasn't being safe. And her behavior towards me was so abusive and so harsh and so beyond. I thought, how did this happen? How did I raise a child that is so belligerent and unsafe and hates me to her core? Which I know now she didn't. She was just so angry and hateful of herself and her situation. But in it, I couldn't see it. As much as I've done work with other clients for so many years, I just couldn't see it. So I think of all the parents that don't have the background that I have and don't have the experience, how that must feel. I know for me, I felt like a bad mom all the time. I thought, I'm just going to pour more love into it. Just love her, love her, love her, love her. But I was enabling her. I wasn't helping her. I felt like a bad parent. I felt such deep sadness, and I felt so alone. I know that under anger is fear, and that helped when I realized it's not that I'm angry with her. I'm just so fearful. It wasn't just the self-harm. It was her putting herself in harm's way. It wasn't following things that I was saying. It was the disrespectful way that she talked to me. Like I was a piece of garbage. I used to say to her, it's like, I feel that I'm a piece of garbage and you're just stepping on it over and over again. And I realized that every time I said that to her, I was holding up a mirror and reflecting how she felt about herself. Being angry and sad and frustrated for so long was so hard. I felt like there was no hope. Even though I kept trying and trying and trying, I never gave up. But those moments, there were moments when I just felt like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not capable. I don't have the strength. I used to get so frustrated. I couldn't. I tried so hard to be that patient, loving mom, and I tried and I tried and I did. I did for a while. I was able to hold it together and stay calm. But my child would push and push and push to the point where I lost it. And then I became the parent that I was so afraid of becoming. I blamed her. I yelled at her. I was so frustrated I would even shake her. I couldn't help her. And I was so mad at myself that I couldn't hold it together, that I couldn't stay calm. Because I did for a while, and it felt so good. I can do this. I can do this. I can stay calm. I can be the parent that she needs me to be. But she just needed me to not be that parent. She needed to see that I could break. Because I believe that she felt so horrible that she needed to see what she thought I felt about her. She needed to see me in a way that I saw her in the way that she saw herself. She hated herself. You can't be that angry and brutal to somebody that I know she loved. I know she loves. If you didn't feel that way about yourself. I really believe that we mirror ourselves and we project it to other people. If you're happy and feel good, then you're nice to people. You're kind to people. When you're bitterly awful to people, that's because that's how you feel about yourself. So the blame game was an interesting one. We blamed each other for everything. The difficulty was we didn't know what our triggers were. I wasn't able to see what she was doing that triggered me from my past and my issues. And it touched a nerve so deep down that I used to get so angry and so hurt and take everything personally, which is a huge part of the problem, or was part of the problem. I took everything personally. I wasn't aware of my triggers. Erin definitely wasn't aware of her triggers. She couldn't articulate it. Maybe she did know somehow, but she couldn't articulate what it was that I was doing that was upsetting her. She tried really hard to tell me. There were times when we were in the car and I would get so frustrated with her and I would lecture her. And she said to me, Mom, when you do it in the car, I can't escape. And I thought, wow, this child is so insightful. This was all before the age of 16. Started when she was around 12, 13. And it was every day. There were moments that she did amazing and she could hold it together. And I was a nursery school teacher, so I used to try all different techniques. I would try to do the sticker method, that if she could have respectful behavior, talk to me, express her feelings in an appropriate way, not be rude, then she would get a point. And I found that going the whole day, she couldn't do it for the whole day. So we broke it down. So from the time she woke up to the time she went to school could be 1 point. And then the next point was from the time she came home from school or I picked her up to bedtime. And I used to find things because she'd say to me, Mom, I need to be motivated. She tried so hard. She tried to be her own therapist, her own guide, her own light into a better world, into a better life for herself. But she was little. She didn't know. She didn't have the skills, but she was so intuitive of what she needed. But just nothing was working. So she said, motivate me. So she wanted her ears pierced. Things definitely started to get difficult when she was 5. But things didn't escalate to the point where she was self-harming until she was about, I think, 12 or 13. But I can't remember. Some of it's a blur and some of it's really clear. But she wanted to get better. I know she did, and I wanted to help her. I thought it was behavioral, to be honest, at the beginning. I didn't know that this was mental health issues. My son had mental health issues, but they showed up very differently. With my daughter, it just seemed like it was behavioral, which is crazy as a therapist that I didn't see it. But life was crazy for us. Life was hectic. So she really just slipped through the cracks in that regard. And I thought she was just, because I took everything personally, I thought she was just being difficult. She just didn't want to listen. So not knowing what triggered me was huge. And I really needed to take responsibility for my part. And I wasn't able to do it. I was able to do it in moments. I could take responsibility. But then that fell short. I needed to be more self-aware, more self-reflective of what was going on. My lens was so small and so short that I couldn't see past that moment, past that incident, past that fight. I needed to widen my lens, but I couldn't do it at that point. It's like being, as Fiona says to me, I was putting up fires constantly. So I was in survival mode. I couldn't think past that moment. This is a huge one. And I didn't realize what it was to enable my daughter until after she went to residential care. I enabled her all over the place. I thought pouring love into the situation was the answer, but it wasn't. It was enabling her. I wasn't able to be firm enough and set proper boundaries. I absolutely tried to be that parent, to say, okay, when you do this, when you have this behavior, this is going to be the consequence. I knew not to call it punishment. I called it consequence. I knew to do what we call front loading in therapy, meaning to prepare her, not to just be reactive, to say to her, when you do this behavior, this is what's going to happen. This is going to be the consequence. And not in the moment of when she was doing it, beforehand, when she was calm and receptive and open. And often with her and with both my children, I would ask them, what do you think the consequence should be? They always gave themselves harsher consequences. But I could never follow through with Erin. I felt like I enabled her to the point where I was basically begging her to listen and to not be rude and disrespectful and not to do harmful behaviors. I would bribe her, I would beg her, and all the while I was enabling her to just continue. I didn't have the walls. I didn't have the foundation, as Fiona has taught me. I didn't have the ability to hold them firmly and set those boundaries. And I was a teacher and a therapist. First, I was a nursery school teacher for special ed kids, and then I became a social worker, a therapist that I've been doing for the last 20 years. I knew better. I knew that boundaries kept kids safe. And I tried to set goals. I tried to talk to her. And at times, she listened and it helped. And she thought I was the most amazing mom in the world. And then I was her enemy, her worst enemy. She hated me so much. And now, of course, I realize, as I've said before, it had nothing to do with me. She needed a safe place to vent her anger and take out all her frustration. But I couldn't see it. But I enabled her so much. I just didn't realize it at the time.